Good afternoon and welcome. This is another part of the Veterans Forum programming coming to you from the studios here in Derry, New Hampshire. What we're trying to do is ask each and every guy and gal who served in any war anywhere if they can and will come and share those experiences with us here in a televised interview. The results of that will all go down to the Library of Congress, who is sponsoring the whole program. It's a way, if you will, of building a good legacy. As an example, we're told that in World War II, for example, there were some 16 million guys and gals throughout the world doing their thing. Today, we're told that there are maybe 15 or 16% of those left. We're dying at the rate of gosh knows what, maybe 12 or 15 a day. And the bad part is, if you guys and gals do not share your experience in this type of a program, nobody else will, and all that will be lost. Today we have another great story, I think, for you, but before we do that, I want to bring this to your attention. It's a brand new system on any telephone in the state. Dial 211, not 911 or 81, 211. It'll put you in touch with the counseling service for any guy and gal on almost anything that you need help for. If you feel you need the help, ask for it. If your friends think that maybe you should have some help, they also can call. It's there, but you have to ask for it, okay? Now, today we have another young fellow who did his thing many years ago, going to share some of that with us. I'll ask Jerry to introduce himself, and then we'll get the show going. If you will, please. Name, address, where you now live, and your branch of service and dates of service.
Hi, Bob. I want to thank you, first of all, for inviting me. My name is Jerry DiGrezio. I served in the United States Army on active duty from 1967 through 1974. I continued my career in the reserves for an additional 23 years. I retired with the rank of colonel. I was an Army aviator. I was on flight status for 20 of the 30 odd years that I was in the military, which I consider myself very fortunate for.
Amen. And
I currently live in Dover, New Hampshire. I lived in Hollis, New Hampshire for more than 30 years, and I moved to Dover about 7 years ago, and that's where I am now.
Happy there?
Very, very. You know, I still work in Nashua, so I have a little bit of a commute, but other than that, you know, if it's not snowing, it's fine.
That's any day in June then around
exactly,
here.
Exactly.
This year's been going
exactly. 70 degrees 2 days ago and then 30 this morning.
You know, the tulips have curves. They don't know whether they're going up or coming down. Okay, that's how you are now. But what I'd like to do is go back and find out how you developed, where you came from. So, for example, where and when were you born, and how was life growing up before you went to service? In high school, your sisters, brothers, and that kind of stuff that you'd like to share with us?
Sure. I was born in Cambridge, Mass. in 1945. My parents lived in Charlestown, right in City Square, right where the Big Dig took a row of houses on Chelsea Street. And we lived there until I was about, let's see, I think I was went in the 5th grade. From there we moved to Medford. And I went to Northeastern University. I was a day tripper. I lived at home in Medford, and I would day trip to school. And prior to my graduation, I went down to the draft board to find out where I stood, and they said, well, as soon as you graduate, you're going to be #1. So I decided that what I wanted to do is pick what I wanted to do, rather than have them tell me what they wanted me to do. So I went and I went to the Army recruiter in Medford Square, and I sat down with the recruiter and I said, well, I want to go to flight school. And he said, okay, well, you can go to warrant officer flight school. And I said, well, wait a second, I don't want to be a warrant officer, I want to be a commissioned officer. And I said, how do I do that? He said, well, what you do is you go to OCS, and preferably one of the combat arms, either infantry, armor, or artillery, and then while you're in OCS, you take the flight school exam, and you go from there. And I said, all right, well, I'll try that. So I went through basic training, I went through advanced infantry training, and then I went to infantry OCS. In OCS, we took the exam, and I had the #2 grade in the test in the company. Well, subsequently, the guy that had the #1 grade washed out of OCS, so he didn't get to go to flight school. So here I am, I'm sitting with the #1 grade, and there were about 25 of us in my OCS class that went to flight school. 24 went to helicopter school, and 1 went to fixed wing school, and that was me.
Oh.
So I went to Vietnam.
Whoops.
Well,
I'm going to have to
okay.
rein you back a bit.
All right.
You just went about a whole bunch of years.
Okay.
I'd like to get back to your early family life in school, high school, brothers and sisters.
Well,
anybody in your family in the service?
Well, I had one sister. She passed away about 8 years ago from cancer. So basically, I'm the only one left in my family other than my children. My father was an Army veteran during the Second World War. My son kind of followed in my footsteps. He's an Army aviator. He's stationed now at Huntsville, Alabama. He made the majors list last month, so he should get promoted. He got a pretty good number on the list, so he should get promoted sometime within the next year. And he was a Black Hawk test pilot. And right now he's working, he transferred over to the Army Acquisition Corps, and he's working in the procurement side of the military, dealing with the contractors and fielding the new Mike model Black Hawk. So he loves his job. He's made a great move.
So he's going for 20 or 30?
Yeah, he's going for 20 anyway.
Okay.
So.
Good deal. Now, again, big lumps.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do it in hunks.
Okay.
Just prior to going in the service, what were you doing as far as schooling and so forth? Had you gotten complete school? Or you
As I said, I went to Northeastern University. I majored in accounting. So prior to that, I went to Medford High School in Medford, Massachusetts. In college, I was very active in our fraternity and some of the organizations in college. I was the social chairman for the fraternity, which I enjoyed quite a bit.
Somebody had to do it.
Someone had to do it.
Thank God
Someone
you
had to
got
do it. Let's see. Other than that,
okay. The big transition, if you will, from civilian. How, where, and when did you get into the service? When you were indoctrinated and boot camp or whatever?
Well,
how you react? Remember that.
I had a delayed enlistment, and
that was because of your education?
Well, no. At the time, as long as you signed up, they would allow you a delayed enlistment. You could get like 3 or 4 months before you had to go in. So I was due to go in sometime the end of October. And after I graduated from college, I went to Algonquin, Maine, and I drove the little cabs and the little buses that service Algonquin, which was a great summer for me. And while I was there, I got a call from my parents. Got a call from the recruiter, and they got in touch with me and said I had to go see him right away. Well, apparently they weren't going to allow me to stay out as long as the end of October. They wanted me to come in earlier. So I went in earlier, and I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for basic training. After basic training, we flew from South Carolina to Fort Dix, New Jersey, which is where I took my advanced infantry training. And we got there in the winter, and I mean, Fort Dix was brutal. That year, it was very cold. And subsequent to the advanced infantry training, I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, which is where infantry OCS was held and is still held now. Only then they had 3 battalions of OCS classes. They were graduating a class just about every 2 weeks. Now, right, exactly. And what they're doing now is they're probably graduating 5 or 6 classes a year. I had a short tour after graduating from OCS at Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah, and that was for approximately 4 or 5 months before I went to flight school. Flight school was held first at Fort Stewart, Georgia, which is where the primary fixed-wing school was held. And then the second part of the flight training was held at Fort Rucker, Alabama, which is the Army Aviation, the home of the Army Aviation.
Now, is that jet or propeller driven?
No, that was all propeller driven. The Army had a couple of jets, but just for a very, very brief amount of time. And they were all, as I recall, they were all in the reserves rather than in the active Army. They had some Cessna citations. And I don't believe they have any jets now, but if they do, they're only executive type transport. They don't have any tactical. That's the Air Force's mission, and they're very jealous of it.
Yes, that's mine. You stay out.
That's exactly right, because it's a funding thing as well.
Oh, yeah.
So, the aircraft that I was we got qualified in a number of aircraft. Our initial training, and we got soloed, was in basically a beefed up Cessna 172. It was called a T-41 trainer. After the T-41, we went to, we had, I believe, about 100 hours in T-41s. And then from there, when we went to Fort Rucker, we had multi-engine and instrument training in a T-42, which is basically a Beech Baron. It was an off-the-shelf aircraft that just was painted with Army colors. And then the second phase at Fort Rucker was getting qualified in the Bird Dog, which was a single-engine Cessna. It was a 2-place tandem seating. Pilot sat in front, observer sat in the back. And our primary mission was reconnaissance. When the aircraft was used basically to go out and find the enemy, once we found them, we controlled a number of things. We controlled naval gunfire, we controlled Army artillery, we also had contact with the Army gunships, which were Cobras at the time, the AH-1G, and we also had liaison between us and Air Force FACs, which are Forward Air Controllers. That's an acronym. And they also would allow us to run TAC air on targets. So we had quite a bit, and people would say to us, "Wow, you flew those little planes." They didn't like to shoot at us. And the reason they didn't like to shoot at us because they knew that we controlled so many assets that if they missed, then we had the ability to deliver an incredible amount of ordnance. And there was a story where they captured an NVA up near the demilitarized zone. And they questioned him, and they showed him these silhouettes of various aircraft, and they showed them F-4s and A-4s and tactical aircraft, and they asked him which one they were afraid of. And the one that they were most afraid of was the airplane that I flew. And they said, "Well, why is that? Why are you so afraid of this one?" And he said, "If you make him mad, he calls his mother, and his mother gets very mad," which I found to be pretty amusing. So
when you're talking now, I'm trying to get the different levels. Your forward air, that would be the guy on the ground.
Well, there was a forward air controller. There was there was a guy on the ground who was assigned, I believe, at the battalion level, who also controlled, would request air assets. But the forward air controller was also someone was a pilot in the air.
He knew
yes.
the language.
Right, exactly.
Cut down the shadow.
Right, and we generally flew with an observer, and it depended on what mission we flew. We had a number of missions. We had naval gunfire mission, where we had a Marine officer who would fly in the back seat and would adjust fire from either battleships, where we had the battleship New Jersey.
Way offshore?
Way offshore. Yeah, we adjusted fire for the battleship New Jersey when it was on station. There were a number of cruisers that were out there that we, at various times, that we controlled. We also had observers who were living with us, but were actually assigned to other units. For example, across the runway, we were on the south side of the runway at Phu-Bai.
Where are you now stationed?
We're in Phu-Bai, Vietnam,
Okay,
which
I
was
wanted
up
to make sure we know
was
where-
up near the city of Hue. It was
Okay.
about 20 miles south of the city of Hue, and on the other side of the runway were a number of helicopter units. We had the cavalry unit, the air cavalry units, which basically flew the little scout aircraft and the Cobras. And we had some of their pilots that actually lived with us and flew with us in our back seat. And if we found targets of opportunity, they would get on the horn,
Grid and go.
and they would call these, and it was one of their own people. So they know who was talking to them.
Oh, yeah.
So in a case like that, they were very, very willing to deliver their assets very quickly. We had people from the 101st Artillery who flew in our back seat, who adjusted fire. We had Vietnamese that we flew from the 5th ARVN Division. We had, let's see, what else did we have? We had a naval intelligence mission where we flew a Navy guy around, and he'd like to, see what was going on with all the sampans in the rivers, which was kind of it was a fun mission, being able to, fly low level.
Yeah.
But we had basically the unit, it was a company-sized unit. We had approximately 30 aircraft. And 2 of the platoons flew the northern missions, which was up in the DMZ, and 2 of the platoons flew the southern mission, which was basically the Ashaw Valley and the Rung Rung Valley and all the way down around Da Nang. And sometimes we would switch off. We'd get, for example, I was in the 2nd platoon, which flew in the southern missions, but there were a number of missions that I would fly up north. Occasionally, very occasionally, we would actually get into North Vietnam. Not very far into North Vietnam, but there were occasions that we would get into North Vietnam. We would also occasionally get somewhere into Laos, which was to the west. There was an area called the Tri-Borders, which was really a very bad area. It was where North Vietnam, South Vietnam, and Laos came together, and it was called the Tri-Borders area.
Like Pittsburgh.
Yeah, right. But it was a very interesting year. It was one of those things that you'd never want to do it again, but you wouldn't trade a minute of it for the world. The people that I met while I was there are my best friends. They are people, and it's a lot different today for the military. As I said, my son is also an Army aviator. He served 3 tours, but with technology today, he was able to speak to his wife on a daily basis. Excuse me. He had Skype where they could actually see, they could sit and look at each other. With us, it was, we wrote a letter, we put it in the mail, went off, took 5 to 6 days to get home. They would have the letter at home, they'd answer it after a day or 2, put it in the mail, and then another 6 days to get back to us. So basically, we're talking 2 weeks before there's any contact. And so when you're segregated like that, away from your family, away from all of your friends at home, the only thing that you have are these guys that serve with you. And the attachment that you develop with these guys, because not only do they become friends, but they're on your wing. Your life depends on them, and their life depends on you.
Got your back.
And there is no other way that I know of that forms a stronger bond than something like that.
Amen.
And I'm very, very happy for the people that I went through the military with. As a matter of fact, just last week, my son and I went to one of the guys I went through flight school with, who has a ranch in Texas, and we spent a week with him down there.
Well,
so the bonds last forever,
Oh, yeah.
forever.
now, let's go back a little bit. You've given me a very big chunk of history, but can you give us a little sample of how your life was, your daily living?
In Vietnam?
Vietnam and all. Well, first off, how did you get to Vietnam? Did you fly or take a boat?
Oh, no, we flew. We flew. It was, at the time, Braniff Airlines was was going very big at the time, and they had a contract where they flew a lot of the troops. And what I did is I flew from Logan Airport to San Francisco, and then from San Francisco I took a bus. First time I ever saw it, across the Golden Gate Bridge, going to Clark Air Force Base. And Clark Air Force Base, I had a port call, and I got on an airplane at Clark, and from there I went to the Philippines, and I went to the Jungle Survival School in the Philippines.
Okay, stop right there. That's what I want to find out.
Okay.
What's the little pieces of your history,
Okay.
if you can? Well,
Sure. Yeah, the Jungle Survival School.
yeah, all that kind of stuff, because most of us have no idea what it is.
Yep. Well, the Jungle Survival School, it was kind of interesting because there were approximately 240 people in my class. 239 of them were either Navy aviators, Marine aviators, or Air Force aviators, and there was one Army aviator. And boy, I'll tell you,
took the heat.
did I get some heat on that one, until we got to the field.
Okay.
And in the field, I was in this group of about 10 people, and I think they were all Air Force, and they had very, very little field experience. And all of a sudden, I became a hero because I taught them how they could heat their sea rations with the cardboard box that they came in, and I showed them how to make a little can of sterno by taking the little can of peanut butter and putting some insect repellent in it and lighting it, and you get a little bit of it's like having sterno that you can heat your seas with. And we spent, I think, about 6 days in the jungle, and they taught us survival skills, what we could eat in the jungle.
Example.
One of the things that they did is they showed us how to make a pressure cooker with a section of bamboo. Bamboo itself grows in sections. They're separate from each other, and they showed us how you could split it and pull a piece back, put rice in it with a little bit of water, and throw the whole thing in the fire, and it became basically a pressure cooker.
Okay.
So a steamer for the rice. They taught us, one of the things they taught us was this. There's a very low ground cover that covers a lot of the Southeast Asia environment, and if you touch it, it retracts. It's like a morning glory in fast motion, and they told us to avoid it because if you walk across it, you could actually see your footprints going across this field.
Like an arrow way.
Exactly, and then they had this graduation exercise, and what they did is they have Negrito tribesmen over there, which is the Aboriginal tribe in the Philippines, and they have a bunch of these kids, and what they do is they turn the whole class loose, and we're supposed to go out and hide in the jungle.
Okay, protect yourself.
And they gave us like 3 blank dog tags, and we'd go out and hide in the woods, and I was underneath this tree, and yet these kids still found us. It was amazing, and what they would do is they'd take the dog tag, and then they would take the dog tag, and after everything was over, they would trade it to the lane graders, and they'd get a bag of rice for everyone that they found. And I don't think there were 2 or 3 guys that didn't get found at all. It was an experience.
It drives it home, though.
It certainly does.
Some of the guys, they get a little zapper.
Exactly. So here we are out in the woods, and we think we're pretty good, and got kids finding us. So.
No. Now, they're working for their food. Okay, what other kind of experience? What was your social life, if there was any?
In Vietnam?
Yeah,
there was.
Okay.
Actually, we had a club when we were there, and with a bird dog aircraft is very susceptible to the weather. It's a fixed-wing aircraft. It's not like a helicopter. With a helicopter, you can fly a lot lower because they're a lot more controllable, and if you get into some type of a situation, it's a lot easier to control the aircraft than it is to fly a fixed-wing aircraft low level underneath the weather. So there was a couple of months that we did not fly during the monsoon period because the weather was so bad. And there was a couple of months where I was the high time. We had a board in our operations area, and it had the number of hours that we flew. And I was the high time aviator for a couple of months in a row, where I had about 130 hours per month. And then in the monsoon, where I was still flying quite a bit for the company, but my time, I only had like 30 hours because the weather was so bad. So when you have a GI and he has a lot of time on his hands in a situation in life, what he does is he improves his lot in life, which means...
That's very semantic.
Okay, which means the rooms that we lived in, we got rocket boxes, and we break them up and we turn them into lumber, and we fix up the rooms that we lived in. The club that we had there was
Now, was your hooch? Was it a tent or a
no?
Quonset
It was a hut, a Quonset hut.
Yeah.
But they were all hardened, which means they were on the sides of the building. There was offset approximately maybe 1.5 feet. There was PSP, which was pierced steel planking, which is used to make runways. Well, what they did is they put a shell around the building, and then between the PSP and the walls, they filled it with sand. So basically, it was protection from shrapnel.
Revetment.
Exactly, exactly. It was like we lived in a revetment. But with the time we had available, we did a lot of improving the buildings where we lived, and also improving the club that we had, the officers club. There was an NCO club, and there was an EM club. And basically our social life revolved around fly during the day, and if you weren't flying at night, you'd go to the club. And we had dartboards there. We had a pool table there. Occasionally we would get USO shows, and when we did have, USO shows, we would invite other units, and they would come over for the shows. So that was basic. That was our.
Were you there during TET?
I was there during TET.
Tell us about that.
Well, I wasn't there during TET of '68, which was when they had the NVA, when they had the big action. I wasn't there during that period. When I was there during TET, it was just another day. It was just another day.
Because they had some horrible stories about it.
Oh yeah, they did. They
infiltrated and zapped everything.
Well, one of the things that they did where I was in Way, the infrastructure, which was secret before TET, revealed themselves during TET because they thought that they were going to be victorious. And as a result, when they started losing, a lot of people knew who the infrastructure was. And as a result, what they did is they massacred a lot of them, and there were a number of mass graves that they found while I was there, where hundreds and hundreds of people were found in mass graves. But for me, TET was basically nothing for me. The unit that I was in, when TET started, they were having a promotion party for one of the pilots who was getting promoted to major, and they caught the entire platoon aircraft on the ground in Way, and all of the aircraft were destroyed. Fortunately, all of the people got away, but all of the aircraft were caught on the ground, all of them destroyed, and we'd land in the city of Way. They had a small airstrip there, and you could still see pieces of the bird dogs on the sides of the runway.
Now, was your ship armed? Did you have guns on it?
When the first half of the tour, we had D model bird dogs, which were aircraft with constant speed props, and they were not armed. When we marked targets with the bird dogs, then we carried about 20 smoke grenades, and we would drop smoke grenades from the window to mark the target. And when we were marking the target, let's say for a jet, the smoke would hit the ground, and we'd say something about, let's say, blowtorch 92 Bravo, from my smoke 11 o'clock, 50 meters. Okay, and we'd try to talk the jet in where the target was from our smoke. Halfway through my tour, they took all of the D models, all of the constant speed prop aircraft, and they sent them off, and we got brand new rebuilt G models, which were fixed pitch props, and all of a sudden we went from being unarmed, where now we had 8 rocket tubes on these things. And
on each side?
4 on each side. And it was a nice change, believe me. And we were only supposed to carry Willie Pete, which was white phosphorus rockets for marking targets. But across the runway was the air cav unit was across the runway, and they kept all of their rockets in Jeep trailers. So we would taxi across the runway, and we weren't supposed to do it, but we would load up with 17-pound HEs, high explosive, and then inboard we'd put 2 flechette rockets, and we'd go out and mark the targets with black smoke.
And what's a flechette?
Flechette is a rocket that has about 2,000 steel darts, about an inch and a half long. And when you fire the rocket, it comes out of the tube, and it just about reaches supersonic speed, and then at that point the warhead opens up, and these 2,000 steel darts go out. It's like a gigantic shotgun shell.
Wow, it held an anti-personnel gun.
Definitely, yeah, it's a bad one.
Yuck.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Now, along the line, you must have qualified to be promoted. Can you give us an idea what steps you went from to, and the different responsibilities and the challenges you
Sure.
had?
Well, let's see.
From flight school on to be like.
Well, from flight school, I graduated from flight school. I was in flight school, I was a second lieutenant in flight school, and then during flight school, I was promoted to first lieutenant, and there was no qualifications required at the time. Everybody, it was time and grade. It was 1 year time and grade. Okay, and then as a first lieutenant, I went to Vietnam, and while I was in Vietnam, I was promoted from first lieutenant to captain. And again, there was no requirement. It was strictly time and grade. And I was a captain until I got off active duty after serving 7 years, and I went into the reserves. And in the reserves, I had to start all over again, and I started all over. I had, let's see, I had about 4 years time and grade as a captain when I got out from active duty, and then once I went in the reserves, I started at day 1 again. So I was 7 years time and grade as a captain in the reserves, and then I was promoted to major. And I had to do what they call the advanced course at the time. All of the acronyms and the names of the schools have all changed now. I was talking to my son about them, and he mentioned something I had never even heard of.
What are you talking about, Dad?
Right, exactly. So I did the advanced course, and that qualified me for promotion to major. Once I got promoted to major, I had to do what was called C&GS, which is Command and General Staff College. And I did that, and that qualified me for promotion to lieutenant colonel. When I was promoted to lieutenant colonel, I was assigned to a unit in Rhode Island, which was called an MTC, which was a Maneuver Training Command. And our mission was to administer tests to other units, which we would do. And we had various sections within the MTC. We had an armor section, we had a infantry, we had an artillery, we had the aviation, we had a medical. And I was in the aviation section. And at the time, I was a lieutenant colonel, and I wanted to get promoted again, and I didn't think that I had a chance if I stayed in that particular slot. So what I did was I took a transfer to, excuse me, I took a transfer to the 1st Brigade of the 76th Division, which at the time was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And I was the executive officer for the brigade. I'm sorry, I was the, yes, I was the executive officer for the brigade. And a slot came up for me to take a battalion, and I took over one of the battalions within the 1st Brigade. And I had that battalion for about a year and a half, and then we had to, we had to case the colors. That battalion went away, so I moved over to another battalion in the same brigade. And during this time, I had been considered for promotion to colonel twice and was passed over twice. And I was with, and these units that I commanded were TDA units, which it's an acronym that stood for Table of Distribution and Allowance. And it basically, combat support units were TDA units, and there's another designation which is a TO&E unit, which is a Table of Organizational Equipment, and these are combat units. So I was able to take a transfer from the training battalion, which I had, and I took over the aviation battalion, which was at Fort Devens at the time, at the airfield at Fort Devens, which was a TO&E unit. Well, once I took over the TO&E unit, I was considered for the 3rd time, and I was selected for colonel.
Good.
So what happened was basically I got promoted out of my slot. But during that time, unfortunately, all of the aviation, the vast majority of the aviation assets in the U.S. Army Reserves went away. They went over to the National Guard. And one of the things that I had to do was I had to shut down this battalion that I commanded. And all of the guys that served in this battalion, I knew most of them for 20 years or so. So it was a very difficult thing, because on the day that on the day that my date of rank for promotion to colonel, that particular day was the same day that I read orders placing these guys either in the retired reserve or reading their orders to the formation where they're being transferred to some other unit. So it was a day of mixed emotions.
You must have been hit by some rifts too along the line.
Well,
economically. Can we talk about that?
We had rifts. The rifts that we had were after Vietnam, and unfortunately, the military is going through a very similar situation right now, and it's an unfortunate thing that when in a wartime situation they build up, and they attract people, and they have more people than they normally have, and then when the wars are over, then they don't have the need for them, so they're surplus, so they want to get rid of them, and we had.
You lose a lot of. I'm interrupting, but you lose a lot of talented, experienced people.
Yes, and the other thing that you lose is institutional memory. And without the institutional memory, we tend to make the same mistakes over and over and over again. And it's unfortunate now where the same thing is going on now, where I believe they're trying to get down to about 420,000 in the Army, and that means there's a lot of people that are going to be gone. My son said that of his year group, that 40% were not selected for promotion, which is quite a few.
That's a hunk.
It's a huge amount. And the other thing that he told me is that they're only getting one look-see now, where before it was you'd get at least a couple of times to get promoted. But I guess one time and you're gone. So not a happy situation.
No. I'd like to go back a little bit, if you will, to get some of the action. Can you give us a couple of stories as far as some of the things you had to stand out in your mind or your memory? Things you had to do, how you did it, and the results.
Well, basically the missions we had difficult missions and we had easy missions.
Give me one of each then. Make it easy for you.
One of the easy missions was the artillery registration mission, because what we would do is basically go out, we'd check up with the artillery center, and they'd say, okay, well, they'd give us a grid to go to, usually an 8-digit grid, and many times it was an easily identifiable point, like the junction of a stream and a road. And what they would do is they would register their artillery batteries, because the artillery round flies differently every day based on the atmospheric conditions.
Oh.
Okay, so it's not something that you could shoot around one day, and then because of the atmospheric condition, the next day it's either going to be much farther, farther out, or it could be short. If it's windy, you get deflection. So what you do is you go out and you register the battery, and then what they do is once you register the round on the target, they enter the information in their computers, and then they're able to extrapolate to other locations. So basically it's a nice easy mission. You go out and you shoot some artillery rounds, and what we would do is the guys who were getting close to DROS, and DROS is another acronym. I think it was Date Estimated Return Overseas. It was basically it was the day that you were going home.
That's a good day.
And everybody who has ever been there knows exactly when their DROS.
The short calendar.
Exactly, and they had the short, and I still have that short time calendar, exactly. So anybody that was getting close within a week or two of their DROS, we'd always give them the easy mission, something like that. Basically it was just going out and firing some artillery at some point somewhere.
Now, would you be circling above while?
Well, what you did is, you'd have a round. Let's say the target was here. What you'd do is you'd fly a horseshoe pattern around it, staying away from the gun target line. So you always want to stay on the other side of the gun target line. Some of the more difficult ones that we had were. We had the Ashaw Valley, which was a pretty bad area. It was in our area of operation for the platoons that I flew in, and we would go out there, and this was what we called a two-ship mission. You always went with two ships. The senior guy would fly low, usually somewhere around 800 feet, and the junior guy would fly above, and his mission was just to keep his eye on the low ship. And what we would do out there is look for movement. The summer before I arrived in country, the 101st, which was the division that was in the area where I was, they had been in the Ashaw Valley that previous summer. The summer that I was there, they didn't go in there, and which allowed the NVA to fortify the area. And what they would do when I first got there, we'd fly out in the Ashaw and we would find trucks every day, because what they would do is they'd drive them at night, and during the day, just before dawn, they'd take the trucks and they'd drive them off the road, and they'd hide them in stream, or under the bushes, under the bushes. And we'd go out and we'd find trucks every day, and we'd run air strikes on them, and we would be able to destroy a lot of trucks. Well, the longer that we got there, I'm sorry, the longer that the 101st hadn't been in there, the NVA were able to fortify the position. So what they did is they built underground bunkers, and they built areas where you could drive the trucks off the road and not see them. So it became less and less. But they also brought in some pretty healthy anti-aircraft weapons. And they had 23 millimeter and 57 millimeter guns out in there in the Ashaw. And usually during the day they didn't want to engage you with the 23 and the 57s because they would give away the position. But at night, if you flew in that area,
you could see the thing coming at
you could see we used to call them flaming basketballs, and you could see a lot of ground fire. So the procedure, anytime you flew out there, you shut your lights off because you just didn't want to, take the chance. Mm-hmm. But that was one of the, and then the guys that flew up north on the DMZ, they would do a recon by fire. And what this was, they would find likely areas where the NVA would be hiding. And they had some fire bases that with the 8-inch artillery, which at the time was the most accurate gun that we had. And they would actually adjust fire on these positions. And it was called recon by fire. And once they know that you have found them, then they don't have any reluctance of firing. Until they, but if they don't know, if they're hidden, they're not going to shoot. They're not going to show. Right, exactly.
You ever have any duty up and down the Ho Chi Minh?
Well, the Ho Chi Minh was actually.
Was that the other side?
It was the Ho Chi Minh was actually in Laos, but it wasn't too far from where we were. It was just a couple of miles. We had branches of the Ho Chi Minh Trail that actually came into South Vietnam. They were 9 Triple Deuce was the name of the 922 and 9 Triple Two were some of the designation of the routes that they had. But there were these trails that ran through the Ashaw Valley. I can remember one. There was a pretty good mountain that was in the Ashaw, and there were roads that were actually ran around the side of the mountain. The Air Force would bomb it every day, and every night they'd have a bulldozer or something fixing that road. It would, and you'd look at it, and the entire area around this road would be totally bombed out, and you'd have this one road go right through the middle of all the bombed out area. I tell you, they had a lot of ingenuity. They had a lot of gumption. I just can't imagine dodging everything that they did. B-52s, F-4s, A-4s, artillery, naval gunfire, and yet they still came down.
They persisted.
And they persisted and they persisted.
Any other thing you'd like to share?
Well, let's see.
I don't want to pump you, but I want to find out why I got you here.
We were fortunate. We didn't lose a lot of people. We did lose some people, and it's unfortunate that the guys that we lost because someone did something that they weren't supposed to be doing. The first guy we lost was a warrant officer. His name was Larry Landersheim. He was in the back seat of a Huey, a helicopter. They were getting an area orientation for a mission that he was going to be doing. And the Huey was flying too low in an area that was really a bad area, and they got shot down, and everybody on board was killed. And I think that if they had flown a little bit higher, they would have been okay. The second guy that we lost because, again, he was doing something that he shouldn't have been doing. He was, we had a little airstrip up at Dong Ha, which was just south of the DMZ, where the northern platoons, it was about an hour flight between where we were based in Phu and where the DMZ was. So instead of having to fly all the way back, we kept a fuel truck at Dong Ha. And the people would take a break, have a lunch, and refuel at Dong Ha. And this kid decided that he was going to do a max performance takeoff in his bird dog, and he had this first lieutenant. He was a warrant officer. He had a first lieutenant in his back seat. And what he did was the fuel truck was in front of a hangar, and it was basically in the midfield area of the runway. Well, what he did is he took off and he kept the aircraft level just off the ground after the wheel cut, and to build up airspeed. And as he got in front of everybody here having lunch, he did a max performance takeoff. Well, it was a day that was about 90 degrees. It was humid, so the density altitude, which is how the density of the air affects the aircraft, was very high. And once you get a lot of moisture in the air, the moisture molecules makes the air molecules spread out. It isn't as thick, it isn't as heavy, so you have to fly faster, and you can't be as heavy when the DA is high. So what he did was he did the max performance takeoff, and he got up about here, and the aircraft stalled. And instead of dumping the nose, he put it into a steep turn, and the aircraft just fell out of the sky, and both of them unfortunately were killed. The third guy that we lost during my year was in the Tri-Borders area, and he decided that he was going to take on a 51 cal with his bird dog, and he was shot down and killed. But it was something, again, it was something he shouldn't have done.
Okay, but it was a calculated risk.
Right, exactly. So, and it's unfortunate when you think about it, because here's three people that should have survived but didn't because they were doing something they should.
The right game.
They weren't playing the right game. Exactly, exactly.
Talking about playing games, let's just shift gears for a few minutes. How was your trip coming home? And when you got home, how were you received?
You know, I've heard a lot of stories. I've heard about people, you know, when they call baby killers. I never, ever had that happen to me.
Good.
Never had it happen. I never met anybody who said something to me that
was derogatory.
But I know that it did happen. It did happen. But I will say that, you know, nobody raised any flags either when we got home.
No, here he's back. No,
right,
no
exactly.
red
And you know, but that's what's so great about the way they treat the military now.
Oh my God, yeah. Every flight comes
and they
in.
deserve it, and they deserve it. They absolutely deserve it. And especially, you know, when I think back, I had a year in country, and I thought that was bad. These kids now, my son has had 3 tours in Afghanistan. There are other kids. I mean, we lost someone a couple of years ago from New Hampshire, and as I recall, he had like 8 tours. Mm. I mean, that's
stretching it.
That you know, that's just overusing an asset. It's just too much. It's too much. And you know, what have we done? What have we done to these kids? Because not only do we have to worry about now, we have to worry about these. You know, what we've done to them and how it will affect them for their entire life.
Now, did you, when you came back, did you join anything like the VFW, the Legion, DAP,
well,
or no? Just yes or no?
I joined the VFW, and I had a very bad experience with it. Yeah. And rather than get specific with it, you know, I can remember when I expressed some interest about joining the VFW, they came to the house and they grabbed my DD-214, and they looked down on the bottom and see what medals you've got. And
Go ahead, period.
But, you know, so I didn't last too long in the VFW.
Now, talking about lasting, this is the last of the lasts. How's your life been since then as far as your family?
Well,
you got any kids and so forth?
I have 2 children.
Good wife, I hope?
Well, I'm divorced.
Oh, but I had a good wife.
I had a good wife. She, you know, we didn't agree on everything, but she was a fabulous mother. We had 2 great kids. My daughter is a physical therapist. She lives in Milford. I have 2 beautiful granddaughters from her. She's married. Her husband is an exercise physiologist. My son, as I mentioned, is is a career military officer. He's in Huntsville, Alabama. He is married. He and his wife met in college at Davidson College in South Carolina, and they have a great son. So I have 3 beautiful grandchildren, and I think back my life. The military was very, very good to me. When I came home from Vietnam, I was a fixed-wing pilot, and fixed wing was going away in the Army, and I said, I want to get helicopter qualified. Well, the unit that I was in at the time, I was with the 10th Special Forces Group at Fort Devens. Well, they came up with money for me to go to helicopter school, but I couldn't find a slot. And I kept calling Fort Rucker, and finally, after about 2 months, I would call down there on a Monday morning, and they knew my voice. And one day, I called down there, and this major answered the phone. He recognized my voice. He said, "Captain," he says, "I'll tell you what, we had 2 people that didn't show up for this class. If you can be down here by Wednesday morning to start class, you can have the slot."
Put a light in the window.
So I grabbed one of my warrant officers at Fort Devens, and he and I drove straight through from Fort Devens to Fort Rucker, Alabama, and I paid for his flight home, but I was able to get down there, and I started class, and I get helicopter qualified. So,
Wonderful.
So,
Wonderful.
And the Army was very good to me. I could have been a recruiter. Everything I ever asked from the military, I wanted to go to fixed wing school, I did. I wanted to go to helicopter school, I did. I had a very good experience with the military.
On that note, well, so we can wrap it up a little bit. What advice, if any, do you have to give some of the kids today? I know we're having a riff and money's tight, but they may be undecided what they'd like to do. Would it be worthwhile looking into the schools, any branch?
Absolutely, absolutely. All of the services have good training opportunities. A lot of these kids, they come out of high school and they don't have a skill, and the military offers a lot of good.
Makes you grow up too.
Exactly. Well, yeah, it certainly does, and it teaches you to work with other people, and it teaches you that there's a boss. And the boss is the boss.
And when she speaks, you better damn well listen.
Exactly, exactly. And, and it's unfortunate in many situations, some of these kids don't have that experience. And the military is a very good lead-in to the rest of your life.
Amen.
Even if you don't want to stay in, 2 or 3 years in the military is a very good experience.
Talking about experience, 2 words. Thank you, my friend.
Oh.
We did it.
We did it? Wow.
We did it. We're film free. Again, thank you very much.
It was my pleasure, and thank you very much for having me.
Folks, before we sign off, I'd like to bring this back to your attention. 211. Remember that number. Thank you.